Welcome back, fellas. So, as I promised, this week's video is a review on the final anime adaptation set in the Move Love expanded universe. Move Love, Schwarzesmarken. This is the anime released between Total Eclipse and the more recent Alternative. But from a chronological standpoint, it takes place roughly 20 years before the events of Total Eclipse and Alternative. Set in the 1980s, and takes place in Europe, at a time when Germany was divided into East and West, where East Germany adopted a socialist governing system, while West Germany had a more democratic one. The story focuses on a TSF squadron stationed in East Germany called the 666 TSF Squadron, Schwarzesmarken, in the Move Love universe itself. This is the squadron that pioneered one of the main combat tactics of humanity against the Beta, a laser jagd or laser hunt when translated from German. This is where a TSF squadron is assigned the role of searching for and destroying a particularly troublesome breed of Beta called the Laser Class and Heavy Laser Class, which emit powerful, high-energy lasers and have incredibly precise aiming. This strain of Beta was one of the main reasons that humanity needed to switch from conventional forms of combat vehicles like tanks and fighter jets to TSF units. And their mere presence on the battlefield makes any form of air support and carpet bombing an unviable tactic. It goes without saying that the squadron assigned this role has to be elite pilots, since they have to deal with the lasers being aimed at them. This is what the 666 Squadron, Schwarzesmarken, specializes in, going in close and eliminating the laser class Beta from the battlefield, allowing their allies to hold the Beta back. But unfortunately, the times they live in raises this already difficult task from hard mode to nightmare mode difficulty, as if dealing with an alien invasion wasn't bad enough. You have to do so with a communist party as your country's governing body. So, not only do they have to fight against the enemy before them in the form of the Beta, they also have to watch out for their countrymen and fellow humans. All of this happening when TSF technology was still in its infancy, so they aren't as powerful as the mechs shown in Alternative and Total Eclipse. The government, the unfamiliarity of the alien enemy, the technological limitations of the time period. Just a true example of an uphill battle where everything seems stacked against humanity's continued existence. Within the 666 Squadron, you have a selection of interesting characters, with the two main ones being the protagonist, Theodore Eberbaha, a person who was originally cold and aloof to his squad mates. Because of events from his past, ends up beginning to care about them after his encounter with his new squad mate, Katya. He has the typical traits of these types of cold protagonists, but experiences growth and change with more of his squad mates as the series presses on. Even when he is put into difficult situations as a result of his past and present colliding violently, which will affect the future of not only himself, but his squad mates and his country. Like with all popular mainstream protagonists, he rises to the occasion with the support of his squad mates and allies. Even when making the hard decisions like eliminating someone he saw as family and just completely breaking down afterwards. It makes him more likable as a protagonist. Another main character of note is the captain of the squadron, Iris Dina Bernhard, a cool and level-headed soldier and highly capable commander who is famous for her missions against the Beta. But all of this is just laying the foundation for a much grander goal, to free East Germany from the threat of the current regime, which she believes will in turn help their country fend off the Beta threat. Another prominent character is Katja Waldheim, but she acts more like a foil to Theodore, sparking his change, and is a crucial element for the plot rather than a main character. The other squad members, while not main characters, function well in their supporting role of the main characters in the series. They aren't just fixtures to the background, and truly aid the main characters in their missions and the overall goal of the squad captain, which is to liberate the country from the tyranny of the government faction that opposes them. the organization called the Stasi, an internal observation apparatus of the Socialist Party ruling East Germany that's responsible for inhumane acts against any who oppose the party. This is where you meet the antagonistic characters of note, the main one being Beatrix Bremer, Iris Dina's longtime friend turned enemy, who seeks to turn East Germany into a quote-unquote perfect observation state, to root out all forms of individuality and free will from East Germany's citizens to fight against the Beta and claim victory. But here's a question. If they do win against the Beta, is it truly a victory if you remove the aspects that make humans humans? It's essentially, you won the battle, but you lost the war. Moving on now, the other antagonist character is Heinz Axmann. But, to be honest, he's just a small fry when compared to Beatrix. He just goes around doing typical evil stuff while pretending to make it look like he was making strategic moves. But he's just a poser. Think Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. That's pretty much Heinz Axmann in a nutshell. Also, while not technically an antagonist, there is one more character of note within the opposing side, and that is Lise Hohenstein, Theodore's distant relative turned stepsister, who ends up really testing his resolve to the goals he wants to help Iris Dina achieve. In any case, the anime itself deals with the journey to liberation from the socialist government in power. By using the 666 Squadron to rack up achievements against the Beta to gain public support and political clout for inevitable aggressive regime change in the form of a coup d'etat, all while having to deal with interference from the Stasi. But unfortunately, it doesn't go that smoothly as other individuals and organizations have their own goals and interests that ends up conflicting with this revolution. The anime does a decent job of highlighting the messy infighting, scheming, and backstabbing of numerous relevant individuals and organizations, set to a snowy and dim atmosphere. While the animation and character designs were pretty crisp for that point in time when it aired, and the mech fights were pretty good and were well spaced between the anime's duration, so the viewer didn't get bored. Of course, the suspense and intrigue of the story was also a big part of keeping the viewer engaged. There were some slight problems with the CG in some scenes, but at this point, I think it's something we as viewers have to just accept. Since this series is almost a decade old and we still have that problem with some of the more recent anime, overall, everything in this anime was done pretty well. And while it's clear that some events were cut from the novel during its anime adaptation, it was still a pretty cohesive and coherent story. In some of the events, you do not envy Theodore, being put into some of the positions he found himself in, which would make or break their end goals. And the ending was a bittersweet one to say the least, where they achieved what they set out to do. However, it came at steep costs, but overall an excellent anime to watch for any sci-fi anime lover. Schwarzesmarken is, in my opinion, the best of the 3 Love anime adaptations. Certainly better than Alternative. But as for Total Eclipse, while Total Eclipse had its own combination of story elements that made it entertaining, like for example the variety of mechs shown throughout the anime, Schwarzesmarken had a more intriguing story, focusing more on the gritty and volatile political climate between different factions vying for power that was taking place during an extinction-level event at the hands of extraterrestrial life forms, where the parties responsible for such inhumane and ludicrous actions can bold-facedly justify it by saying it was all to defeat the Beta and protect the country. The funny thing is that I could probably see people with mindsets like this showing up in real life. If such an event like an alien invasion was happening in real life, answer in the comments if you agree. The only thing that would have made this series better was if they gave it a full 24 episodes to further expand that point in time of the Love universe. But for a 12-episode series, it was pretty good. They certainly knew what to keep, what to summarize, and what to omit in order to not affect the overall story. The Love universe is strange, in the sense that the side stories and spin-offs appear more interesting and successful than the main story. I suppose the reason is because both Schwarzesmarken and Total Eclipse expanded more of the world in MOV Love Universe. Battlefield in Europe, Russia, and so on. But alternatives still use the typical Academy-style sandbox where such dating sims normally take place. And everything revolved around Takeru and his actions with little to no assistance from anyone else. With the exception of his teacher, from a certain perspective. It could just be that at the end of the day. Takeru was a tourist to that world, while the protagonist from the two spin-offs lived and experienced the horror of the beta and human orchestrated conspiracies for their personal gain at the expense of others, and the decreased chance of humanity emerging victorious from the beta threat. So it made these stories a bit more interesting, especially when they focused on different things, so they weren't repetitive. Like how Total Eclipse was more about their mech development and the use of psychic and paranormal abilities as weapons against the beta, and how Schwarzesmarken showed the devising and implementation of the laser Jagd tactic, as well as to free a country from a governing body that was willing to sacrifice its citizens to remain in power, and restore freedom to the country from foreign influences, all while fending off the beta, where they were in imminent danger since East Germany was the front lines of Europe in this series. Call me crazy if you want, but the two side stories for me were way better, even when they are also dating sim-type visual novels. On that note, I think this series also has different heroine routes as well. I think the one in the anime was the Katya route. And once again, just like in Total Eclipse, the heroine selection and character designs were way better than alternative. I'll end the video here. Till next time, bye.